Hello, I'm Claire. Welcome to my channel Claire Bobbins. This week's episode of Friday Sews is all about fitting. Fitting from a busty sewist perspective. So if that's something you're interested in, come back in just a moment. I'm also going to be covering fitting a narrow shoulders, doing a narrow shoulder adjustment. See you very soon. Welcome back. So this is the Jenna Kaftan by Sinclair Patterns that I made last week. It's a lovely pattern. It's quite a new pattern. It was released 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I went into quite a lot of detail in last week's Friday Sews about the pattern, sizing details and all of that. So do have a look at that if you're interested in a kaftan pattern. It has the external facing, but today is more about fitting. The process I went through, I took quite a lot of video when I was making this dress. This is a wearable toile, so I used a very cheap fabric, hoping for a dress that fitted me reasonably well at a first attempt, but that I would probably need to tweak before I started on my best quality fabric. And I wanted something that I could just wear when it was hot weather and, you know, for a fairly casual type event. So I've already worn it a couple of times. It's really nice to wear. I like it. But I wanted to improve it. I found that the shoulders, because I had to size up, and I had to size up because when I looked at the pattern measurements, full body, is that the right word? Looking at the pattern sizing from my own personal measurements, I found that they came up slightly smaller than cashmere, not by very much, maybe ½ an inch. So that just put me into the bottom end of the next size up, and that was because of the bust fitting. Now, had it been a side darted bodice, that would have been very easy to deal with. I would have just done a bigger full bust adjustment and used my sloper to help me decide on exactly how much I would need. But I couldn't do that because it has an underbust dart, which gives the fullness at the bust but allows you to take in the excess fabric below the bust. And the bottom of the pattern piece is curved, so I didn't want to interfere with that particular design element of the garment. So I had to look at other ways in which to achieve a better fit across the bust for me, and I need a 46-inch bust across the front, but I'm only 40 across the upper chest. Now the Sinclair pattern was coming in at 39.5 across the upper chest, and there is an ease there, and I did think, would that be enough? And it might have been enough, but also it might not. And going up to the 16 gave me exactly the 46-inch full bust that I needed, so I decided that could be a better starting point for me. Now, when I did my cashmere sloper, the first time I did it, which was a year and a half ago, I started with the recommended size 16 EF cup, which is what I've made this in, so I know it's quite a good size for me, but I found it too big on the shoulders, so I expected this to be too big on the shoulders, and it is. It's too big by about ½ an inch on the shoulders, so the shoulders just follow the round of the top of my shoulder, and the top of the sleeve sits just below, and I don't like that look. So I mean, it's fine on this for now. If I was being really picky, I could just take a little pinch up there, but I'm not going to do that on this. It's fine. It's for casual wear. Nobody's not a sewist is ever going to notice. So yeah, but I wanted to do that, something about that for my final dress. I also found the bodice a little bit long, which took me by surprise, and I've heard 1 or 2 people say since I made it, oh yes, I found the bodice a bit long. So, but it's a different pattern company, and you live and learn, don't you? So maybe they do say if you have a short torso, go for the next height down. But I think it's only about 1/2 inch, so I think the short file, because they do 3 different height files, Sinclair patterns, if you're not aware of that. They do a tall, they do a regular, and they do a petite. And I fall into the bottom of the regular one, so I'm not that far from the short file. I think it goes from 5'3", and I'm 5'4" and a bit, but it goes right the way up to 5'6". So I'm in the lower half of that height range. But normally I find bodices a little bit on the short side for me, particularly bust darts. I always have to lower bust darts from cashmerette patterns and from many other patterns, unless they're in knit. It doesn't seem to affect me quite the same in a knit. But for woven garments, darted bodices, I have to move the bust dart down. And I had done that on this, and I'd moved it down by about 3/4 inch, which then left me with the dress feeling a little bit too long. So I decided, I think also what the waist casing, which sits on my natural waist, comes in at the top of the skirt rather than the bottom of the bodice. So I think that also perhaps makes it feel a little bit longer in the bodice. On my cashmerette Kinnerton, I think the waist casing is on the added onto, it's slightly different anyway. So on that one I always feel like I need a little bit more length, and on this I feel like I need a little bit less length. But we're talking marginal amounts. If it was a ready to wear, it would be fine. So I decided that I wanted to shorten and take something off the length, but with this curved pattern piece I didn't want to alter that. So I had a really good look at the pattern pieces again. I had a look at the narrow shoulder adjustment that I'd done on my cashmerette first sloper, and worked out how I was going to do that, and I did that. And then I decided the best option would be to take out most of take out 1/2 inch from the length of the bodice where I'd added in my 3/4 inch. So I just did that. So it's now only 1/4 inch addition across here, under the bust but over the bust dart. Therefore I needed to get 1/2 inch on the bust dart. So all I did there was to move the bust dart apex down. So I shortened the dart, I made it slightly more acute. I didn't alter the legs of the dart at all, I just drew into the new point. So I'm keeping the amount of reduction of fullness around this part of the pattern of the bodice, and I've just sewn that up in some challis. I didn't do facings, it's just a shell, and that's worked quite well. I've tried it on and I think that's a go. When you alter your front bodice piece, shoulder piece, you also have to alter the back, obviously, so that the shoulder seams match, and these shoulder seams now are about 1/2 inch narrower than these ones, but it hasn't affected the facing at all. The facing is completely unchanged because there's plenty of width here in this shoulder. And then everything else is the same. I reduced, that's the front of I have had these on top of each other just to compare. Put it back on the hanger, Claire. What's she like? I don't know. So yes, so the darts, I moved the point of the dart because I need about 1.5 inches between my bust apex on whatever bra that I'm planning to wear with this, and the point of the dart. Otherwise you get really pointy darts with full busted things, and they don't look great. So yeah, so there's the dart leg. You might not be able to see that. I will put some close-ups in. There's the dart legs in the same place, and the point of the dart I've just moved lower. So I'll show you that. I'll show some photographs on the pattern, and I'll show a little bit of video on how I how I did the narrow shoulder adjustment, and I learned about that via the cashmerette fitting guide. I'm sure there are different ways of doing it, but I follow Jenny Rushmore's instruction. So if you're a Cashmerette Club member, you can go straight to her details on that. I'm quite pleased with this now. It hasn't. The beauty with doing the narrow shoulder adjustment in the way that Jenny shows you is that you don't affect the arm side at all, because you pivot rather like you do when you're doing a full bust adjustment, and you pivot from the seam allowance. You do exactly the same with the arm side. So I'll go through what I'm wearing today. This is the Love Notions Sunday romper. It's a really lovely, easy breezy, nice to wear, nice comfortable pockets, drawstring waist. It's a lovely garment, very, very comfortable. I made it in a Pound Fabrics French Terry, so very affordable. I made this as a toile. You get it on and off over your head, and I use a clear elastic stabilizer. And I've made this at least 2 years ago, and I've worn it lots, and it's not really bagged out at all. The neckline, it's worked really well. And I just zigzagged that on, I think before I did it before the neckband. I can't just remember now, it's that long since I made it. But you can't see it if you look at it, so I must have done it inside the neckband. Yeah, lovely, really like it. So nice V-neck, and yeah, Pound Fabrics, really nice French terry. I've had some really lovely, good quality knit fabrics from Pound Fabrics. Quite sort of poppy fabrics, which are very similar to the quality you get with Stoff. High quality, really nice, interesting prints. Yeah, would recommend them. So I think they might even still have this. They had this in a couple of colourways, and it has I don't know if it's black or navy. It's either a very, very dark navy background or black, and then it has quite a lot of navy white and a little splash of orange. So yeah, I like it. It's nice. What else have I been doing this week? It's been really hot. Yesterday in the shade outside it was 35 degrees, which is very hot for the UK, and the house has just been boiling. It's rained this morning. It's quite cloudy. It's still warm. It's about 25 degrees today, which is much more manageable. We don't, for my American viewers, we don't have so much aircon in the UK. You get it in the big supermarket stores around all the chiller cabinets, and some office workers have it, and the big modern apartments, that type of thing. But in your normal 3-bedroom semi, you don't tend to get air conditioning because it's very expensive. It's unusual. We don't often have days when you need it, and our electricity costs are 4 or 5 times the amount that you pay in the US. So particularly since the energy crisis, electricity costs have gone sky high. So it would be really tough to afford air conditioning, especially unless you have a high income, fair enough. But it's not the norm in UK homes. We tend to be geared up with carpet and keeping warm on cool, wet temperate climate. So we've been all sweltering in the weather, and so this weekend I'm off with my lovely friend Liz, my sewing friend Liz. I'm off to the Lorna Knight Academy, Sewing Academy at Bradnop near Leek, and she's hosting the Baby Lock Open Day. So I'll be going to be going along to get a little bit more information and hints and tips, and maybe an accessory set. We'll see for my Baby Lock Primo. So I'm quite looking forward to going there and finding out which yarns are perfect for it, and yeah, getting a bit more technical information, shall we say. So I'm looking forward to that. And tonight I'm off with my lovely friend Sandra Stitched to watch her daughter Charlie in their latest production. So I'm looking forward to that. Sandra's picking me up later. We're going out for the evening to the theatre, so that'll be lovely. So I'm going to leave you now. I'll pop in the various bits of video for you to look at. I will start with the narrow shoulder adjustment. I hope that's useful for you. I hope you have a lovely weekend of sewing, and thanks to Jen from Today in Jen's Sewing Room for creating our Friday Sews hashtag and letting us all jump on the bandwagon. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. You might even have picked up a couple of tips. I hope that too. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye. So this is the actual paper pattern that I've done, my actual Sinclair pattern, and you can see from the pieces there it looks quite confusing, particularly with all the lines on there for the different sizes, but you can see they just about make out the triangles here. So I've traced this off nice and boldly so that I can show you how I did that. It's a very similar process to a full bust adjustment. So the first thing is to decide how much you want to remove from the shoulder, and I decided I would remove 1/2 inch from my shoulder. You also need to make sure you know what the seam allowance is, and on this it's 5/8 of an inch, which happens to be the width of this tape measure. So I'm just going to sketch in, using this green pen, a line for the 5-inch seam allowance from the edge of the paper, just to show you. I'm just using a whiteboard marker so that it doesn't damage anything. And we need to follow the curve round. It is a bit approximate because I would be doing this with a nice fine pencil and doing it more accurately if I was doing it for real. So this is just so that you can see really clearly what I'm doing and hopefully get the idea a little bit more easily. So I've marked those on. We don't need to worry about the neckline facing area. The crucial bit is we're going to be putting a sleeve into here, so we want the arm side to stay, the seam line of the arm side to stay completely as it is, which is why we're going to pivot around that. So the first job, and I'll change pen colour again, the first job is to cut a triangle across so that we can remove the amount we want to remove, and I want to remove 1/2 inch. So I'm actually going to mark that on the piece that I want to remove. I'm going to mark it on here in purple. So that's the amount I want to take out. I'm going to choose a random position on the arm side where the line is fairly straight. I'm just going to choose a little line there, and I'm going to be marking across to the seam allowance, and I'm going to be going from the very corner of the, there we go, so that's in from the seam allowance. I'm going from the very corner of the paper pattern to the seam allowance, and I'm going to be cutting a slash across there, and then I'm going to be leaving a tiny little hinge and cutting out to the seam. So we'll cut that now. It looks a bit dramatic, but actually it works really well. So if you think of doing a full bust adjustment and how that kind of works, so it's the seam allowance, the seam line, the stitching line that we're keeping the same. This outside line doesn't matter, the blue line doesn't matter, that's only the cutting line. Okay, so we've now got this section here loose, and we can move this down. So if I move that down, that's the amount I want to take out from the shoulder, but we need this to be level really. So I'm now going to cut up to the seam allowance on the arm side, which is here. And again, it's a bit random. I'm just going to take a line perpendicular to the line I've cut already, and I'm only going to do that to the seam allowance, which is here, and I'm going to hinge it there. There we go. And then we have a small hinge, there we go. So again, we're keeping the seam allowance line as is. So I'm going to cut that up. Doesn't really matter where this is. Leaving a tiny hinge here, and now we can lose our amount here, but we keep this straight, and I'm going to stick this in place. There we go. I'm going to re-stick the hinge, and I'm going to put a piece of paper behind here, which will allow us to fill in. So it's moved our shoulder across, but it's left the arm side stitching line exactly the same length, albeit moved in a little bit. So on the back I can just put a piece of paper over that. Normally when I'm sticking patterns together I use a recyclable tape, but I thought it would be a bit tricky for you to see that. So I'm using this magic tape, which Scotch magic tape, which peels off again afterwards. We need a tiny bit on the line here, and I'm straightening out the edge of the arm side with this one. I'll show you that in a moment, and you can trim that off. Remember, it's the cutting out line, it's not the sewing line, so it doesn't really matter what shape that is. It's not going to affect the garment shape. It does look very odd when you look at it. You think, oh, how on earth can that be right? But it works. So you can see here now we've got a little bump, so we just sweeten that off, just trim that off with scissors. I'll just put a bit more tape on there, trim that off with scissors. Once you've done this, you would then retrace it so it would all look neat and tidy again. I'm not bothering with mine, but there we go. That's just me, I'm a bit lazy. But in theory, so that you're not confused when you're using it, you would just so we just sweeten that line so it's just nice and smooth. Take off the little corners, and you can see we've gained a little bit here on the cutting out line, but the stitching line has remained the same. Now at this end we remove, again sweeten the line, we remove the bit that we don't want. That's our narrow shoulder adjustment there. Just take that off. Now if you want to, depending how much your shoulders drop, you can then tidy up this line here. So you can fill in this section, which then straightens this up. Now I have a slightly sloping shoulder, so I've folded this off and I'm happy with the fit. So that is exactly your choice, whether you take that off or whether you fill this gap in, depending on how the pattern fits you. If anything, for me, I've got a little bit too much fabric at the top, so I've folded that little bit down to straighten out this line. But you can take that up, which retains it's on the actual pattern piece, it's a little bit smaller, because of course that will lengthen slightly the shoulder a little bit again. So filling that in is the more proper way to do it, so I'll just stick that in, and then that sweetens that top line without adding to the width of the shoulder. And then we just cut those bits off, and then you would retrace this. There we go. And that's how you do a narrow shoulder adjustment without affecting the arm side. There we go. So that's a ½ inch removed from the shoulder. Hope that's useful for you, and I hope to see you very soon. If you've enjoyed this, if it's been useful, please give it a like, and I hope to see you next week for another episode of Friday Sews. Bye bye.